Hi everybody, my name is Maria Aspilicueta. I am part of the Operations and Supply Chain Management course this summer, and my final project is going to focus on the pharmaceutical industry, on overcoming challenges in raw material supply chain. So this presentation specifically will focus on overcoming risks and driving resilience through data-driven solutions. So we'll start by covering a brief background on the industry, some key challenges, the current state, the proposed solutions. We'll talk over an implementation plan and some sustainability considerations, and we'll end with the references that were used to put this together. So first, I think it's important to understand the big picture and what the objective of the pharmaceutical industry is, which is to ensure the safe, timely, and cost-effective delivery of life-saving drugs across global markets. And they do so by taking part in this supply chain workflow that you see here on the slide, where you start with your raw material suppliers, you go through manufacturing, then you go through a warehouse for storage or directly to the distributors, goes to the pharmacies, the hospitals, and ends up with the end users, who in this case are our patients. This presentation, however, will just focus on the suppliers piece and the challenges that come with that. So some challenges that have been observed are the dependence on global markets. A lot of the suppliers are from abroad, and so geopolitical tensions or pandemics or natural disasters pose a challenge with getting those raw materials into the US. There's also the cold chain integrity that has to be considered. Those raw materials require key temperatures and conditions for transportation that must be met, otherwise they cannot be used. There are some regulatory hurdles to take into consideration. There's different agencies that have different policies that need to be met. There's also a challenge with demand forecasting. If the company cannot properly predict what the market is going to be like, they cannot understand how much raw material they need to get for production. And then there's also inventory management issues. Again, you need to understand what you have, what the conditions are, in order to know how much to get from your suppliers. So the focus area and a key area of improvement is related to enhancing the resiliency in sourcing of raw materials for manufacturing of pharmaceutical products. And that's what this whole presentation is going to focus on. On this slide, we're going to cover the current state that we have for the raw materials supply chain in the pharma industry. And these all came from some research that was done online. So first of all, we've observed significant growth in the pharmaceutical goods that are traded worldwide since the 2000s, so a growth of $629 billion. Also, based on a survey that was done to pharma executives, a lot of them, 50% of them, expressed that sole sourcing is a critical vulnerability for their business model. Then moving on to the APIs, which stands for active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are essential for the production of pharma products. We've seen that this raw material, most of the manufacturing facilities are located abroad versus here in the US. 65% of supply disruptions have been linked to geopolitical risks, and 40% of disruptions were linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. So those numbers are pretty significant and do really shake the ability of pharma companies to put out their products into the market. And all in all, it's observed that a disruption in supply chain leads to a loss of $5 million for the company. So this shows why it's so important to create some resiliency with your raw material suppliers. And that's why we are proposing a few solutions for companies to take on. First of all, implementing some newer technologies like RFID and Internet of Things for real-time tracking and transparency in the transportation of the materials. Also, using digital twin simulations to model risks and have a better understanding of how to react to that risk. Additionally, diversifying the supplier base and developing regional hubs that are located closer to the manufacturing facilities. And then last but not least, executing some exercises to fully understand and optimize the inventory at the site level. So we propose an implementation plan of 4 phases to cover about 18 months or a year and a half to fully complete. The phase one consists of doing an initial assessment to understand the current state of the company and the suppliers, and also allocate resources for this whole plan. Phase two consists of deploying the digital tools. Phase three involves diversifying your suppliers and creating regional hubs. And then phase four involves doing optimization around inventory. So on the bottom, you can see a graph that shows how much each phase or how long each phase will take. But all in all, we expect it to take a year and a half to complete. So the first phase, which should take up to 3 months, is just doing an initial assessment to understand the current supply chain capabilities and the readiness up for the company and the suppliers to take on the newer tools. So it involves a few local resources at the company level. And the key actions are to conduct a supply chain audit, to establish a cross-functional team, to implement this plan and carry it out, and also to allocate budget for all the resources that you will need, tools and also personnel. Some obstacles that we foresee are a resistance to change, having a limited budget or expertise, so you may need to consult outside of your immediate work people, and also having lack of standardized data formats across the global suppliers. So it's important that as one company implements newer technologies, the suppliers that they work with also are keeping up with the new technologies out there. Phase two involves deploying the digital tools. So this would take about 6 months to complete. And it involves beginning real-time tracking and risk modeling by using RFID and Internet of Things sensors on the critical raw materials, so your Class A materials. Also launching pilot digital twin models to understand what the risks are and how to mitigate them. So that's a risk management tool for preparedness. And then it also includes training the staff on the newer tools that are being put out there for use. Some obstacles that we see here are having issues with integrating the current and the newer tools, having inaccuracy in models because they're only going to be as good as you make, as the information that you feed into them. Some privacy concerns that could come up from the suppliers because they may need to disclose more information than they're used to. Increased cost from the newer technologies, and also again staff resistance on the new tools. Here you can see the digital tools that we're promoting to use. One of them being the twin simulation, where you have a physical supply chain, and you also have a digital model of it so that you can throw different curveballs like a geopolitical tension between two countries that may disrupt operations and see how you can get around it and continue getting those raw materials. And also we have the Internet of Things. As you can see on this truck, there's going to be various sensors that measure your temperature, your humidity, vibrations, location, and it gives you more transparency of where the raw materials are and how they're being transported. And this all helps make some data-driven decisions based on the feedback that we get. Phase three involves diversifying your supplier base, so that will take about 12 months to complete just because it's a long process, but that the objective here is to expand the supplier base and create some regional hubs so that you're not relying so much on suppliers that are located abroad. The key actions here are using the previously developed supplier scorecards and digital twin models to identify and replace the high-risk suppliers. Also start initiating some ESG aligned contracts with new and legacy suppliers to focus on the sustainability initiatives for the company. And then utilizing demand forecasting to understand where the new regional hubs should be located. Obstacles here is that you may have different material from the different suppliers, so you may have to do a thorough review of compatibility. There might be longer lead times because you need to get the suppliers onboarded with this new way of working and the newer tools. And then again, regulatory hurdles from having to requalify some of the systems. Finally, phase 4 involves inventory optimization. So here the objective is to enhance inventory management and have some buffer in the stock strategies. So the key actions are to conduct ABC classification of the raw materials to understand which ones are the ones that need to be more focused on, which relates to which suppliers need more attention. Also implementing some dynamic safety stock calculations to make sure that you don't run out of stock. And then applying some statistical models to optimize the inventory levels and make sure that we can continue producing at all times. Obstacles that we foresee here are some data inaccuracies impacting the classification results and overstocking risk, again, if not properly modeling the inventory. On this slide, we have some sustainability considerations that are tied to our implementation plan. From an environmental perspective, we expect to minimize the wasted material by having continuous monitoring of the conditions of our raw materials coming in. We also expect a reduction in fuel use and emissions by optimizing our transportation routes and also lowering our carbon footprint by having less transportation through our regional supply hubs. From an economic perspective, we expect lower costs associated to proactive planning based on our models. We expect being able to make some cost-efficient decision making, again, based on risk management models that we've developed. And then also from the ABC classification, we expect improvements in our working capital. And then from a social perspective, having that continuous production ensures that we can deliver all the medicines at all times into the market, which builds public trust. And also by having the regional hubs, we support local economies and bring more money to local areas. So that concludes the presentation. All we have left is just a big thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I will do my best to answer them. And then here's just my reference page of some resources that I've used. Thank you.